Let's bring in the panel now. Journalist Candice Holdsworth is here, columnist at Telegraph, Madeline Grant, and broadcaster and author Laura Dodsworth. Candice, is this the beginning of the end of the Tory party? That's the question, isn't it?
See, I don't know, because I go back to when UKIP, you remember when Douglas Carswell and Mark Reckless defected to UKIP? And there was a huge hoo-ha about it, and everyone was like, oh, what does this mean for the Conservative Party? And then it all kind of fizzled out.
Although, to be honest, the Conservative Party wasn't quite as much on its arse as it is now.
Well,
pardon the French.
So what I do find interesting about this Lee Anderson defection is that if they are trying to focus, if Reform now are trying to focus on getting concentrated support in the red wall, which is what they need in our electoral system, you can't have distributed support, you need very concentrated support. That's interesting. If you see a similar collapse in the vote, in the Conservative vote, and to some extent the Labour vote as well, then maybe they could actually have some serious electoral chances.
Yeah, I think so. Madeline, any word on the grapevine in Westminster that others may be joining Lee Anderson? There's been a few names thrown out.
Certainly rumoured, and it's been touted that, you know, as many as 9 or possibly even more could be thinking of jumping ship. And I think that actually would determine if this is just a kind of isolated problem for Rishi Sunak. I mean, if it starts to happen with regularity, you get this kind of drip, drip, drip of defections. With the Conservative Party morale already at such a low ebb anyway, with, you know, growing numbers of MPs coming forward to say that they won't bother to refight the election next time around, you know, this is the kind of thing that collectively points to something terminal.
Yeah, well, Harry Cole's reported tonight, I think, Laura, that there's a big row going on currently in Downing Street because half of the people in Rishi Sunak's sort of inner circle didn't want him to suspend Lee Anderson in the first place. And now this has happened.
I think it's a terrible mistake. There are 2 problems. There's defections and voters. The thing is that suspending Lee Anderson, and, you know, we've talked about this before, his words were crass, but they were very much in line with popular sentiment. Suspending him showed that if you are working class origin, if you are, if you've got socially conservative values and you're concerned about Islamism, the Conservative Party is not for you. There's going to be, obviously, a number of Tory MPs staring down the barrel of defeat, wondering if this is the time to make a principled move, maybe, or a self-interested move. But I think the bigger problem is all of the people that Lee Anderson has been speaking for. And they don't see themselves reflected not only in the two-party system at the moment, but in the kind of liberal, progressive, centrist media that were hand-wringing over his so-called Islamophobia and not the Islamism and the culture wars that he's been concerned about. So those red wall voters don't see themselves reflected anywhere.
Right. And people are making a lot of the fact that this is the 3rd party that he's joined. He's gone from Labour to Tory to now Reform, and will he end up back at Labour? You know, I mean, I'm not that concerned about somebody who changes party. Are you?
I think as well, I think for a lot of people in Labour, the sort of old Labour supporters and old Labour voters, they do feel very alienated by this kind of, for lack of a better phrase, woke turn. And they don't know where to go. I mean, I have many family members in the north of England who voted Labour their whole lives, and they are very disillusioned with the way things are going. They cannot identify with it at all. So you could see why people do switch around quite a lot and trying to find who represents me, where do I belong? I feel politically homeless.
Well, I think that's what happened last time around, wasn't it? Because if you look at that constituency up in the northeast, it was a former mining constituency, and they voted Tory. They voted for Boris Johnson because they wanted to get out of the European Union. So shifting has been going on for quite a long time, Madeline.
Are we talking about Lee Anderson's seat here?
No, this was in the last election. It was, I can't remember which one it was, but it was one of the northeast sort of mining areas, which used to be a massive mining community, now no longer because there's no more mining. It was always Labour. It now votes Tory because it wanted to leave the European Union.
Seats that would be true of. Yeah, I mean, there was this, the tectonic plates of politics have shifted. I suppose as someone who of a kind of small c, if not large c disposition, I do wonder what makes some of these MPs conservative in a meaningful sense. You know, what is it that they're interested in conserving? I see quite a lot of, I suppose, quite sort of almost radical thinking when it comes to institutions. So, for example, they would say, the House of Lords has, I don't know, we don't like what the bishops say in the church, in the House of Lords. We should eject the bishops from the House of Lords, or we should abolish the House of Lords. This, to me, is quite unconservative, quite radical. What you do is you figure out how you can make the system work in your favour rather than burning the whole thing to the ground. So in that sense, I think there is perhaps a an absence of... And actually, I think this could be something of an issue in the Reform Party, because there are a number of different views represented, in much the same way as currently is true of the Conservative Party. We all know how hard it's been to reconcile those divisions. The economic platform is basically a kind of Thatcherite one. I wouldn't say a lot of Conservative MPs think that we need to spend more on, you know, the kind of MPs who might be considering jumping to Reform. They're not interested in having a small state, low tax. So this could be a point of... And in fact, there are some Reform people who, although we heard from Rupert Lowe just now, who's very much in favour of this, that sentiment is not universally shared in the Reform Party.
Not everybody wants Lee Anderson to join, does they? And that's true. And also, I think you're right. Lib Dems used to be very like that, Laura, didn't they, before they got into government, where, you know, they never used to agree on anything. And they all had completely different views on economics and different views on social mobility and all sorts of things.
Well, that's right, but that's because the tectonic plates have moved. Like Madeline said, you know, the right-left paradigm, I don't think is at all meaningful coming into the next general election. I'm not remotely interested in it. I don't see the fact that he's gone from Labour to Conservative to Reform as a problem. It's a symptom. It's a symptom of where we are. What his conservatism mean, his brand of it, means is that he wants to conserve some very basic things that we didn't think the Conservative Party even needed to be concerned with, such as conserving the truth about biological sex.
The Conservatives have been very good on biological sex.
They've been OK, but they did introduce the Gender Recognition Act. They're responsible for quite a lot of the trouble.
What, in the noughties?
Yeah, they're responsible really for quite a lot of the trouble that we're in now. It's been an enormous effort, hasn't it?
Well, Penny Mordaunt famously got up in the House of Commons
but I think that's a bit. I think that's a bit unfair, because actually the SNP had gone completely nuts with this, and the Conservative Party very effectively prevented them from going full steam ahead with the gender recognition.
But I think Laura's right. I mean, they did kind of get on board quite early on before they realised it was a train to nowhere.
I think they've had to be kind of pulled up by the collar a little bit by seeing Keir Starmer perform so badly. But that's only one of a number of issues that I think that ordinary, small c, socially conservative people want to see upheld, and that's what they see this move as being emblematic of. I mean, equally, you might see somebody move to the SDP, but I mean, they've got even lower awareness than Reform. One thing about his joining the Reform Party is it's going to do a lot for the awareness of the party.
It will.
I think it's polling at about 13%, but what it suffers from is a lot of people haven't even heard of it.
Yes.
I think there could be quite a surprise among young voters. And I speak not from having conducted any polls or being aware of any, but as a mother of teenage sons. You know, one of my sons and all his friends are going to vote.
There is a bit of a right-wing backlash in sort of older teenage boys. That's very true, because I've got the same thing.
But what do you do with our electoral system, the first part of the vote?
Well, here's the answer, right? Bring back Boris Johnson. That's what they're all saying. Is that going to happen? It's not going to happen.
I think right now they're at the point where nothing seems to work. Any big policy announcement isn't received that well. Like throwing the dice just seems a more attractive option.
I don't
just
think
go
Richard
for
Sunak
it.
has ever looked more out of control of his own party, and he's never really looked in control, but now it's just as bad as it's ever been, I think.
The morale is absolutely atrocious at the moment, for sure. Will it result in some kind of coup of him anytime soon?
I'm not sure anybody wants it.
I think a lot of Conservatives understand quite rightly, in my opinion, that if they were to have another change of leader between now and the general election, they would just look completely not. I mean,
ridiculous.
I can't say.
I know what you mean, though.
Time in the evening.
I know what you mean.
What that would look like. So I think the feeling is things are really bad, but what else can we do? We'll stick it out and try to make the best of things.
But that's where it's been for ages now, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse.
But the real damage happened in terms of the polls is Truss. They never recovered from Truss. Nothing Rishi Sunak does, and unfortunately, she torpedoed the reputation for economic competence that was always the Conservatives' kind of trump card electorally.
And she's still trying to torpedo the party from outside, even now, which is amazing. But thank you, guys. We'll have you back very soon to talk about all manner of other things.